So, welcome and thank you for joining us this evening for this virtual event, the Monhegan Artists Residency, the first 35 years. Tonight, we're going to learn more about a quiet island organization that's doing some really good work behind the scenes here on Monhegan. I'm Jen Pye. I'm the director of the Monhegan Museum of Art and History. And before I introduce the panel, I just want to go over a few technical details. So if any reason your connection fails during this event, don't worry, we're recording it and we'll post it on the museum website soon. Mark will probably have it available as well. So you aren't going to miss out, and just be patient. Panelists are joining us from, as we said, all over the world. And so we might run into a few issues with Wi-Fi, but hopefully it will behave and we won't have any problems there. There will be a time at the end of our panel discussion to ask some questions. So please type those into the Q&A field, and if we don't get to them during this program, we'll be sure to email you with an answer afterward. And as we said here on the screen, we recommend charging your device or plugging it in, maximize your Zoom screen, close your other computer applications. And if you use Gallery Zoom on View, you should be able to see everyone. So with those tips, hopefully everything will work smoothly. And I'd like to go ahead and introduce our panelists now. Tonight we have Leith MacDonald, and you can see their names. So Leith is the current
Hello.
president of the Monhegan Artists Residency Corporation. He's an artist, a curator, and an educator in Mid-Coast, Maine. Leith first came to Monhegan to paint when he was an art student back in 2001, and he has returned to live and work seasonally on Monhegan. And in the years since 2009, he's maintained connections with the island by visiting for work and with his family on vacations. We also have Chris Crosman, who was an early president of the Monhegan Artists Residency Corporation. Chris served as the director of the Farnsworth Art Museum and the founding chief curator of the Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art. And he's currently living in Thomaston and is a freelance writer and art consultant. And then we have two past Monhegan artist residents. Margeurite Robichaux was an early participant in the residency. She came to the island in 1990, and she currently serves on the board. She has an MFA from Louisiana State University, and she first came to Maine as a student, which is when she grew to love the state. And now she lives in the woods of Northwest Maine. And one of her favorite subjects is the Bigelow Mountain Range, where she lives. And she spends part of her time each year painting in a small studio in southern Louisiana, where she grew up, and I believe she is right now.
Yes.
And Krisanne Baker. Hi, Krisanne. She was the 2016 teacher resident. Krisanne is an ocean advocacy artist and educator. Her work concerns water quality, availability, and rights of water and its inhabitants, both locally and globally, and inspiring worldwide ocean stewardship. Her multimedia installations incorporating science and art are studies of the patterns of the natural world, symbiotic arrangements of color, and ocean life in macroscopic and microscopic views of the heart of the planet and the sublime. So I'd like to start by asking Leith just to describe what exactly is an artist residency.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you very much to the Monhegan Museum for hosting us. An art residency really is an opportunity for artists to step out of their normal environment, out of their homes and their studio, into a new place where they are, free of the interruptions and constraints of their day-to-day lives, and have an opportunity to, experiment and perhaps, explore something new. And that's exactly what we provide out on Monhegan Island. The residency really, I'm going to give a little bit of a art history lesson here. As I've been learning about the history of our organization, it really goes back to the Karina Building, and here we see a picture of it back in 1921. It had been a post office on Monhegan, belonged to Elva Brackett and she sold it in 1975 to an artist named Robert Semple. And Robert Semple really was at the core of this whole plan from the beginning. He was a textile artist on Monhegan and kind of an unsung hero. He and his partner Edgar were the ones who painted the Karina pink back in the 70s. And Robert worked with needlepoint. Here on the right-hand side, you can see a lot of the pillows that he did. He had done some painting and worked as an art therapist, and later in his life, really got into needlepoint and needlework, and made, by all accounts, hundreds, if not, 1,000 of these pillows and throws, and really, I think, needed to keep his hands busy, perhaps, and was just working almost maniacally at these fabric pieces. And I'm going to advance to on this slide, you can see an invitation to come and see him. He worked with this Bargello stitch, and in the orange piece here is an invitation to his summer workshop. You could come out to the island and you could see what he was really working with were pillows, rugs, belts, mandalas, pretty traditional textile things. But he had a major leap forward on Monhegan as an artist himself. In the 70s, he was a part of the group of artists who were out there and was working with Zero Mostel, who had commissioned him to make a piece of his own that gave him this real leap forward. And if you look at the piece on the right, you can see his workshops have changed now to experimental canvas work and working with his own designs. And on the next slide, you can see this piece that was really Robert credited as the pivot point for him. This is a comment on Z. So really, this is a response to a Zero Mostel painting. This Zero is something Zero had made in oil paint, I believe. And Robert had made his own example of it. But not even using this Bargello stitch, he created something he called Libra stitch, which was, free of general rules and constraint. It wasn't a brand new stitch, but basically came with this idea that you would just stitch as far as you wanted, and, kind of any means necessary to get it done. And so here you can see, one of Zero's motifs, or a village motif, kind of done by Zero, and then through Robert's vision. And then later, Robert continued here with some really early photographs from a Monhegan Karina resident, Martha Miller. Some shots of the Karina, and as you walked up the stairs, it was still full of Robert's threads and the things that he had used. His pieces were still around the houses. And here's some more photos you can see from her time in the residency. I want to include this view out the window. So many of us look up into that window, and getting to be a resident was a wonderful time and an opportunity to get to look back out. And then here's Martha with some of the work that she made during her time behind her. But Robert had this experience in the 80s where he himself got to be an artist resident, and he went to Mexico and spent time down in the winter of 1984. And this led him to completely change his own style. And he found great inspiration in the motifs of these pre-contact American pieces. And his late work, he made these gigantic, bright, colorful textiles. Some of these pieces are over 5 feet tall, and they're all signed with his signature in the bottom right corner, the 3 simple dots. And that's the Morse code for letter S, as in Semple. Now, Robert didn't come up with the residency program on his own. Really, it seems the genesis of this project came from Ricky and Peter Bermer, who you can see here. These were year-round island residents who, by the 1980s, had really noticed the rising cost of living on the island. Rents were going up, property values were soaring, and long gone were the days of renting a studio for $15 a month. And they worked with Robert Semple, who had obviously had his own experience with a residency, and came up with this idea. They needed a place to house somebody, and they really together came up with this core nugget of the Karina residency. And as Robert's eyesight was failing him in the late 80s, he sold the property to Peter and Ricky. And then they really had the space and began to take off. And for the first several years, it really was just a mom and pop organization. I think Peter and Ricky did all of the work, from the mailings and just trying to organize things. But then they brought their plan to Chris Crosman, who at that point was director of the Farnsworth Art Museum. And I think Chris really helped them level up and bring the residency forward. And I wonder, Chris, if you could speak a little bit about your time and involvement early with the residency.
Sure, I'd be happy to give you what I can recall, which is not all that much after 35 years. But I was brand new at the Farnsworth. I arrived in April of 1988, and I think Ricky and Peter were among the first visitors on my doorstep at that point. And Rockland was far from the capital, the art capital of Maine, as they like to talk about themselves these days. There were fistfights, drunken brawls on Main Street, as I recall. And a couple of my friends from the Island Institute and I would sometimes have to break them up on our way back from lunch. But anyway, Ricky and Peter presented the Farnsworth with what I felt was an extraordinary opportunity. It had dawned on me and our really very new board that the Farnsworth really should look to its own backyard and try to support living artists who are living in Maine on a more or less year-round basis, not necessarily all year, but at least for a substantial portion of their lives and their working lives. So the idea of an artist residency that was at least in the early years partially sponsored by an art museum was kind of a new idea, even to me. There weren't really very many of those around, if any. I think it may have been the only art museum sponsored residency program in the country at that point. But Ricky and Peter, as Leith has pointed out, really spoke to the idea that Monhegan was no longer affordable for the not only just the younger but the lesser known artists who were laboring throughout Maine, and there were clearly many artists who would benefit from a bit of time on Monhegan and to continue that wonderful history and tradition of artists working on Monhegan that goes way back to well, I won't go into the history of Monhegan Island. That would take all night. But in any case, it was really an honor and a privilege to work with Ricky and Peter to get this off the ground. And in the early days, it was really very fly by night. I'm not even sure how we selected artists then. I think maybe Ricky and Peter had some ideas about artists. They asked me. I knew, not very many artists were active, but I knew where the artists might be, located. So through galleries and friends of artists and artists themselves, we put together a mailing list and tried to get the word out with a I think initially it was a brochure. Yeah, there it is, Karina Residency. And that outlined really the specifications of the program. It was, I think, initially 6 weeks. It may have been cut back to 5 weeks early on. We were doing this on a bare bones budget. In fact, Farnsworth in those days didn't have 2 cents to rub together. So We scrounged, I think, $1,200 out of some designated donor fund that was vaguely worded so that we could use the money for these purposes, supporting artists. And the idea was that we would provide $100 a week or $600 total for each residency program, which Peter and Ricky said was certainly enough to buy groceries at the Monhegan store or wherever, but not much more. So again, it was very much a volunteer effort. The Farnsworth's involvement was fairly minimal, other than to try to coordinate the selection of the artists and to help Ricky and Peter put together some guidelines for who would be eligible and this, that, and the other. They already had a pretty clear idea how they wanted it structured. So our involvement was really as cheerleaders and and an initial helping hand. But in any case, I think it was our effort to say that we were still interested and would remain interested in the artists who are living and working in Maine right now in our own backyard. And the Karina House residency was a low key kind of flare into the night sky to say, here we are. Hopefully, we can connect with you and support you in this way, and perhaps later in different ways with exhibitions and acquisitions. So, as they say, the rest is history, I suppose. But I'll be glad to try to answer questions later on as we go through this. I don't know, Jen, are there? I don't know who else is. Yeah, hi.
So, I think that's a nice segue to the an artist. So Margeurite was one of our early residents. I think your residency on Monhegan was 1989.
No, it was 1990. I was
Sorry,
second year. I was the third artist.
The third artist out there,
Being
and one who was supported by the Farnsworth Art Museum soon after.
Right. Yeah, I was there for 6 weeks. I got my $100 a week stipend. I had residency in the Karina House, and my studio was in the spa, which at the time was Billy Payne's store at the top of the hill, and it was above the spa, which is now
the Lupin Gallery.
The Lupin Gallery. I went in the spring, the late spring, and I had Ricky and Peter really guided me through the residency. I talked with Ricky before I went to Monhegan. She advised me. I had never been to Monhegan, and she advised me not to go out before the residency, but just to be surprised and awed and discover it on myself. So I boarded the ferry on the first morning, and on the ferry I met Elena Yan, who saw all of my equipment I was taking out, and we became great friends, and she was instrumental in introducing me to artists, Monhegan artists all over the island. But Ricky and Peter really were great supports back then. It was really their program at the time, and they encouraged me and supported me and introduced me around. It was a life-changing experience for me on Monhegan. I did more work in 6 weeks than I think I've ever done in 6 weeks since. It was so inspirational, and it was getting to know the island and the people on the island. It was so different from me coming from the mountains of Maine and before that from Louisiana, the marshes of Louisiana. It was, and because I went out to Monhegan knowing its history, and I was rather intimidated by the artistic history of Monhegan, and I really spent my time there trying to find my own voice. I painted a lot of pieces of landscapes in Monhegan, and I kept a journal. I did a watercolor every day. I did large oil on paper pieces so I could roll them up and get them off the island. But it really changed my perspective of being a working artist and incorporating into a community that supported the arts. It was really a life-changing experience for me, and I continued going out, staying friends with a lot of the people I met on the island. I would go out every year and visit for a while, and then eventually joined the board. And I joined the Monhegan Artist Residency Board mainly because I wanted to give back to other artists the same sort of opportunity that I had had on Monhegan.
I just want to jump in for a second. I'm going to advance a couple of slides that I think speak to this experience that so many of us have had, but really it's clear that you have had is, these themes, these stay with you. So this painting of yours we're looking at, this oil on paper, was done in 1990.
On Monhegan, yeah, yeah.
And similar themes, happening again in 2017. I
Mhm.
think we have another one from your
That
first
was
trip out
that
there.
was my time on the island. Gull Rock was one of my favorite places to go late in the afternoon after all the day trippers had left, and I would go around with my watercolors and my little jar with my martini in it and sit on the cliff and paint um, a watercolor, and then I'd go back in the studio, and this was a big oil on paper piece. But it was one of my favorite places to paint on Monhegan. And that's a more recent image of Gull Rock, which I continue to go draw or sketch every time I go to Monhegan.
So, Marguerite, you've been on the board a bit longer than me, certainly, and you were a part of the board when we started a new kind of residency. There's always been this 6-week residency that became a 5-week residency, but now
Right.
there's a 2-week residency. Could you speak to that?
Well, yeah, one of the things we talked about on the board was adding some sort of educational program. And we talked about different ways to do that. But we also considered every year when we called for applications for the residency, we would get notes from teachers, art teachers in Maine, who would say, I would love to apply, but your two residencies overlap with my teaching in the spring and the fall. I can't get out there. So we decided we would create a shorter term because teachers don't have a lot of time off in the summer and their time is really, really busy. We would um, uh, apply and have a 2-week residency for teachers in the middle of the summer so they could attend. That was really the way it came about. And from the very first, we had very enthusiastic participants. Krisanne can talk to that when when I'm done. But it's turned out to be a very successful program for us. And this past year, we had a meeting on the island with some of the past teacher artist residents to share what they've taken back to their classrooms, which was one of the goals of this is to spread the Monhegan experience beyond just a single artist, beyond an artist coming in the spring or fall, but for a teacher to take this experience back and then spread it among her students and among the school. Um, that, I think it's been a real successful program for us.
Yeah, I wonder, Christine, could you speak to us about your experience as a teacher and participating in that 2-week residency? What kind of
Sure.
impact has it made on you?
I'm sorry.
What kind of experience or what kind of impact has your experience made on you?
Significant. Thank you for asking. I came to Maine 35 years ago from doing the Poor Starving Artist thing in New York City. And I'd actually been working in a gallery that specialized on Madison Avenue in 19th and early 20th century American painting. And there were so many examples of Monhegan. It was a much better art history education for me than what I ever learned when I was at RISD. And I'd seen all these gorgeous paintings of Monhegan. And so when my partner and I came up the coast, I knew about the Farnsworth Museum because some of those paintings and the provenance of some of the paintings. So we got to the mid-coast and got to Main Street, Rockland, kind of looked around, was like, ooh, 35 years ago was, like you said, was pretty rough. But the Farnsworth was there and Caldbeck Gallery was there, and it just had a really good feel about it. So we ended up settling there. And the very first summer, I treated myself to going out to Monhegan for my birthday, and just being a day tripper. But I got back on the boat and was like, oh my gosh, I have to figure out a way to get back out here. And at the time, I was working towards my certification to become an educator. I had a degree in painting, but needed the education certification. And, working on fixing up an 1820s farmhouse. And, so the day job prevented me from applying for the 6-week at the time Karina residency, which I was drooling over, but I couldn't afford to take that kind of time off from my workaday world. But I did become a teacher and got a position at Madomic Valley High School, where I taught for over 25 years, and I absolutely loved it. Was in my own backyard. But every weekend on my birthday, the end of September, which often coincided with Trap Day, I would take a long weekend, take an extra day, and go out to the island for the weekend and paint. And my students would always say, "Where are you going? What are you doing?" And so I'd always share that with them and tell them how important it was to my personal art practice that I step out of my comfort zone and go to this place that just has absolute magnetic energy and so inspirational that like you said, Margeurite, the first time that you went, you're just like cranking the work. And the first time I had the 2-week residency, I was working like a maniac, and it wasn't because, anybody was making me. I just was so driven and so inspired. And then I was able to take that back into my classroom, and I always share with my students the work that I'm doing, not to expect them to work the same way, but just to show them that I'm also a working artist. And they loved it. They always wanted to hear more and see more images. And so I eventually developed, because I'm so tied to the ocean, I always have been all my life, where I grew up on Cape Cod. Don't tell me, I shouldn't have said that. I developed a curriculum called Gulf of Maine Dare to Care, where I was looking at what was happening with climate change, probably like 15 years or more ago. And my own work was focusing on issues with the ocean and climate change. And so I developed this curriculum for the students where they would learn about all these endangered species, 50 plus of them that travel through the Gulf of Maine. And that they had to learn scientific names, what they ate, what were stressors, whether it was climate change, ocean acidification, pollution, human overfishing, whatever. And then they had to make their species in ceramics, and we started this installation in the cafeteria. And my little joke to myself when I came up with the idea was, it's a school and we're going to start with a school of fish. And the cafeteria was this kind of barren wasteland of bathroom tile. And so I thought, we're not getting a new school anytime soon, so we're going to beautify this place. And the kids were really into it. And it's so wonderful. When I would go through the cafeteria, I'd always see kids at the wall pointing to a piece that they made and telling their friend about the experience that they had in making the piece and connecting to, deeper to the ocean that's in our backyards. Monhegan was my way of really immersing in that. It's great living on the Maine coast, and I spend a lot of time where I'm based in Waldoboro. Friendship was kind of my go-to for getting down to the ocean and doing some naturalist studies. However, there's just something magical about Monhegan, and I think when I applied for that first 2-week residency, I remember that I wrote something about the clarity of the water and the air around you is just so crisp, and the light, it's unparalleled. And so it's been really formative in my work, being able to immerse myself, no pun intended, because most of my work is underwater, but I can't recommend it high enough. It's just, if you've ever thought about it, but thought, oh, well, never get something like that, definitely go for it. I've encouraged a lot of teachers to apply for it since the 2-week one first opened up, and I know a lot of good people have gone through so far, and that was such a great kind of reunion that you did over the summer, Leith. So thank you for that, because it was really fun to get to know some of the other teachers that had also, and what they had gotten out of it as well. It's just a really rich program.
Yeah, you're welcome. I think that was a very powerful experience for all of us. One of the things that differentiates the Monhegan residency from many of the others in Maine is that it really is a solo experience. We ask that you don't bring a partner, you can't bring an animal, don't bring children. It really is time for you to work free of interruption. And the trade for that is there's really no expectations. You don't need to create a body of work or deliver any kind of a program or do any kind of writing at all. We really just trust artists that they will take this time to do the exploration and experimentation that they need. But this past summer, to bring a group of people who have had that solo experience together, it was really wonderful to kind of just be listening into these conversations of, I had this experience, I did too. And everybody kind of thought they were alone, but actually, have this great togetherness. I hope we can do more things like that in the future. I wonder if you could help me connect a dot or two. I mean, how is there a connection between Monhegan and where you're at now in Thailand, Krisanne?
Oh, most definitely. That's such a great story. I mentioned to you, sorry, it's a little warm here. I mentioned to you that I go out to Monhegan every year for my birthday. It's been 35 years now. I missed 1 year because of health problems, but I was out there 2 years ago, and I'm walking along the main road with a friend of mine and an artist, Susan Lord, that I know that lives there, or has lived there year round for many years. Was standing on the road talking to another extremely tall woman like myself. I was like, oh, someone taller than me on the island. And so she introduced me to Muffy Pendergast. And Muffy said, oh, Susan was showing us your underwater work about coral reefs and here in Maine. And I need to introduce you to this fellow here on the island who is doing coral reef restoration work. And I was just like, wow, that would be fabulous. No expectations, we exchanged a little info and walked away. The next day I ran into Muffy and Frank Bruckman, her fabulous painting partner, down at the wharf because it was trap day. And so Muffy and I were chatting, and she said, "Oh, that guy that I mentioned, Chris, I really want to introduce you to him. Where is he? I know he's on the island here somewhere." She turns around, and there's Chris Corber standing right in front of the barnacle. And he happened to be back from Thailand visiting the island. And so I got a chance to meet him. And within 5 minutes of us talking with each other, Chris is very much into experiential education, as am I, especially being an art teacher. But I mentioned to him this Gulf of Maine curriculum that I developed for my students, and described a little bit of the work just in a minute or two. And he was like, "Wow, can you come where I am and do that with our program?" And I've been actually dreaming about doing something like that with a person that I met who runs the National Coral Restoration Program in Mexico. But I couldn't do it until I was one of those that said, "Could I please, have some different time on Monhegan other than the spring and the fall that you do for." Same thing. I wasn't able to do what I needed to do during my summer vacation. So when Chris invited me to come to Thailand to do this work, it's based on the Gulf of Maine curriculum that I developed for my students at Madonoc Valley High School, and have shared with others. But we're just simply modifying it to become the Gulf of Thailand Dare to Care program. And we've gone to the schools. You see the woman pictured in the middle of the pink room there. Her name is Kun Rod, and she runs a program called Trash Heroes. And she also runs a restaurant. She's a graphic designer. She dyes clothes with natural dyes from the island and leaves that are just beautiful, steam printed onto these clothings. Amazing woman. So she invited us to come to the school with her because she does a once a week Trash Heroes program to educate the students. And we had done Trash Heroes cleanups on the beach once every Saturday morning since we've been here. So where was I rambling to? My connections here is we are in the process of setting up a program. We've been here for about a month now, so we're trying not to be a colonial presence where we just come in, barrel in and say, "We're doing this and you should do this with us." But we're working with the Thai people as well as people that are coming to visit. And it's an education program that is in support. It's like a pilot program that's in support of the Coral Gardeners, which you may have heard of. They're originally based in French Polynesian Morea. They just opened a new site in Fiji, and their third site, which is not officially open, but is in the process of getting up and running. And so this artwork that Muffy and I are doing together here is a pilot program where we're trying to engage not only the children of the island, but any of the visitors that come through. So just this past week, we started on Tuesdays and Thursdays giving free art lessons. The school does not have really good funding, and the people of the island don't necessarily have, it's not in their realm really to go out and buy art supplies. So We're providing free art supplies and snacks and drinks, and an art lesson based on the coral reef that is literally right outside my porch steps here. And a lot of this reef right here is dead due to previous practices, mostly fishing practices, where they used dynamiting or bombing, as they called it, and sometimes cyanide poisoning to stun the fish. But it did like horrendous damage to the reef. And that's happened all over the world. It's not just indicative here of Thailand. So there are places where people are growing corals in order to replant them and transplant them back out onto sections of the reef where it can regrow. So we have done some daily snorkeling out here and found that there are like very small small communities of corals that are growing. And if you don't know about corals, they're animals, not plants. Each one of the little patterns on it is its own little being, and they live in these colonies that just kind of grow. But with climate change too, with the warming waters, they're kind of up against that. So Coral Gardeners is working on replanting areas of the reef so that it has a chance to rebound from the years of neglect that it's had. And our coral reefs are, they provide about 25% of the fish in the ocean nursery to begin with in life. And they also provide vast amounts of protection to the coastlines, and as well as feeding people. So the healthier your coral reef, the more plentiful the fish will be and more food for people. So it's definitely in our perspective to try to keep them as healthy as we possibly can. So this is the way that my work has developed from my teaching practice at Madomic, and now I'm teaching on this island in Thailand. It's a volunteer position, but it's a residency of sorts, but it's not an official residency. It's a pilot program that Muffy and I and Chris Corber have created together. And our goal is to also train a Thai local person who lives here, doing what we're doing, teaching the art about the coral reef. And then after we leave at the end of April, then this person that we have as an intern or an apprentice will be able to take over for us and continue the program in perpetuity, and just keep the education component and art and science component of it going.
Amazing. Wonderful to see, one island residency transforming into another, and how things stack and spiral out. It's really inspiring and powerful work. Thank you for doing that.
My pleasure.
When you were speaking about the volunteerism, it reminded me that the Monhegan board has always been a volunteer organization. It was started by the Burmers, who volunteered their time and energy, and some other island friends. And this group has, slowly grown, and a lot of residents, like Margeurite, have come back. As I've been looking through old board records, it's been really interesting to see the folks who have benefited from this, often come back in and serve, volunteer, help us with, mailings, doing events like this one, fundraising, trying to be able to pass this experience forward. One interesting letter I was reading was a board member speaking about this was, kind of giving Maine young emerging, we always struggle with the word, but giving Maine artists some of their heritage back, that ability to come out to Monhegan and have that experience to make art, free of the day-to-day realities that you have on the mainland.
Leith, one of the things that the board does is, besides the residencies, we present 2 programs a year for the public. We do normally a lecture on the island during the summer, and we do something on the mainland or digitally now, like this program that we're doing right now, so we can spread the benefits of the Monhegan residency beyond just the single artists who are participating, so that we can inform the public what we're doing and see what becomes of the time that the artists spend on the island.
Yes, that's right. I was thinking about, kind of why we do what we do and trying to pass forward this heritage of Monhegan. But I wonder, as artists, why do artists apply to residencies? What made you to decide it would be a good idea to just drop everything and go live on a rock for weeks at a time?
Well, one of the things is being able to leave behind your responsibilities at home. If you're going away for 6 weeks, you take care of things before you leave. You pay your bills, and you make sure that your road is going to be plowed if you're not there, that sort of thing. And like where I live, you don't have to go to the dump once a week, and you don't have to go to the post office and get your mail, and you don't have to clean your house. You can just let all of that go and not think about anything else but working. And especially with not allowing friends or visitors to come, which I think is an important aspect of the Monhegan residency, is you're alone and you use your time to your best advantage. Um, I I know there are residencies where families can attend, but I think some artists want to get away from their families to work.
Yes, I know I think it began just as a necessary space issue. And I know that a lot of other residencies these days have, really made a shift to try to become more family friendly and more welcoming and inclusive. But it's one of our, um, it's just sort of the necessities. I feel like everyone has a partner in their island residency, and that is the island, which brings itself and has to be reckoned with. And one of those realities is space, and we really don't have the space to put up a family. So the Monhegan residency is a necessarily solo experience.
Mhm.
I wonder, was that difficult for either of you in the weeks that you were there?
I the first time that I was on the island, my son was already off in college, so that wasn't a problem. But I know it sounds kind of silly, but leaving my 2 cats behind for 2 weeks, I wanted to apply for the 5-week one at that point, but I had a cat who was elderly, and I was just like, oof, I could maybe leave her for 2 weeks, but in the hands of somebody else, but I don't want to leave her for 5 whole weeks. And I've heard other people say similar things. They don't want to leave their animals behind. But that was the hard part for me. Everything else, I was just perfectly happy being on the island.
Sounds like a net
As
positive.
was I. Yeah. My significant other came out for a day trip, and a good friend came for a day trip, mostly to replenish my gin supply. Um, but it was um, I had plenty of company if I wanted it from islanders and summer residents. And I had plenty of time by myself if I wanted it, which was, I think, is really important to artists.
I see
Mhm.
somebody in the chat had just asked if I was painting here in Thailand, and yes, I am painting in Thailand. I've been doing watercolor studies. I just brought small watercolors with me, and at the last minute, I couldn't bear to not paint in my oils because I love painting in oils. But I've been picking up found wood. There's a piece from a boat. I don't know what it was used for, but it was definitely painted the way the boats are. And so I've been snorkeling every day, and there's a lot of beautiful spiny sea urchins. And so I've been painting those and the coral. And I have another one that I've done so far of a giant clam that is just the most amazing velvety blues and purples and silvery patterns. It's just, it's like a wonderland, you know. Supposedly this reef is dead out here, but Muffy and I go snorkeling every day, and it's our challenge to find something new and wonderful. And we do without fail. There is definitely life out there. There are survivors. So I'm calling this my Survivor series. And I'm going to try to continue to paint on found wood. It's just that a lot of the wood that I find here is teak, which is super, super heavy and durable, but I don't want to have to cart that back home. So still trying to find some pieces to work on. So yes, to answer Martha's or Bethany's question, yes, I am painting out here. Besides setting up the ceramic studio and teaching art lessons.
Awesome. I wanted to just take a minute. I think we're getting fairly close to the end, but I wanted to make sure that people knew how to apply. And in fact, the Monhegan Art Residency right now is open to applications. You can go to our website just by looking up monheganartresidency.org. And there's a submittable form. The applications are open through March 19th. You can wait until the very end, but there's no reason to. I feel like we always in the last week have a flurry of activity, but I'd like to encourage anybody who's listening, if you know an artist or a teacher or are an artist or a teacher you think might benefit from this experience, please do apply. Since 1989, the residency has brought out over 70 artists to Monhegan, and we're fortunate to have Margeurite and Krisanne here, but they're two of a chorus of voices and variety of experiences that we're really fortunate to be able to share forward, and really looking forward to who will get to go out this year, and seeing the results of their experience, and who knows what roads they will follow or what other islands they'll be visiting, like Krisanne, where else in the world they'll end up.
You never know.
So there have been a few questions about eligibility and how participants are selected. Can you speak to that, Leith?
Sure. So the residency really has a focus on Maine artists. I think initially you needed to be a resident of Maine, and that has since expanded to artists with ties to Maine. And within the application, there are a few essays, and one of them is a short essay, just what are your ties to Maine? I think there's another little bit to write about what it is you think you might try to accomplish on the island.
Although the jurying is a blind jury, the jurying is on the quality of the work that's submitted.
Right. Yeah. Sorry, I was trying to maybe just give you a rundown. Perhaps this is boring, but just a rundown of what's required. There's a few short essays, but the core of it is six images. We need 6 examples of your work, which are juried by a blind jury of 3 jurors this year. Our jurors are Jamie D. Simone, the chief curator from the Farnsworth Art Museum, Maine artist Alan Bray, and our fellow MARC board member Sarah Webb will be looking over these pieces this year, and they have the privilege and the difficult decision to narrow it down to just 3. We do 2 5-week residencies this year. We'll have one that begins in May, the second one that begins in September, which goes over the Trap Day, where Krisanne had her experience connecting up that led to Thailand. And then also our 2-week teacher residency will happen this year, late June into early July. So we'll be picking and sending 3 folks out to Monhegan this summer.
So what's the future for MARC? Where are you going next?
That's a good question. I think we are, certainly looking forward to meeting our next 3 residents. We're hoping to build and continue to connect this cohort of Maine art teachers. It's been, I think it was a really powerful experience last summer to gather that group, and it's exciting to see how that is filtering out into classrooms and reaching into close to 1,000 students instead of just 2 or 3 artists that we're able to send out each year. And yeah, the residency is continuing to evolve. We're an all volunteer board. So some of us are terming out and others are coming in. So we're always looking for people who are interested in joining and helping. Specifically, I want to make a call out. We're looking for some financial minds and anybody who would bring some tech savvy to our team would be particularly useful at the moment.
Well, yeah, we don't have
we're going anywhere. We're really just trying to maintain our toehold on the island, and I think it is interesting. We're a quiet group. We don't own any property on the island, so there is a bit of mystery of kind of who we are and what we do, is we don't actually spend much time there necessarily. But we're eager to maintain a presence and just continue to build on this powerful Monhegan or American art legacy on Monhegan Island. Sorry, Margeurite, I was speaking over you. Do you have?
No. You go ahead. You're covering all the bases.
Super. Yeah, well, I think that's it. I think that's where we're at. We're looking forward to seeing our new applications, and I'm going to be working with this jury, so I'm excited for that up in April, and then we'll be making our announcement. I think by April 19th, we should be able to say who's going to be coming out this summer.
That's exciting. Would you ever have expected 35 years ago, Chris, that it would have turned into this 10 weeks of artist residency on Monhegan?
No, but I think it's worth saying that the Monhegan Artists Residency set the Farnsworth on a new course too. It had a very direct impact on the mission of the museum, in support of Maine and Maine artists and their work here, and also just in general the idea that there are artists working in Maine that just because we haven't learned too much about their backgrounds are still doing work that needs to be recognized and looked at by Maine museums. So in a way, I think the MARC program has had a statewide impact. Every museum in Maine now pays attention to Maine artists, and I think some of that stems from the origins of the program with Ricky and Peter Bermer. So good job, and hope good wishes for the next 35 years.
Great. Well, I feel like unless there's anything that you feel like you really wanted to say that we missed, I feel like it's time to wrap it up. And thank you to everybody who joined us tonight. It's been really interesting for me, even living on Monhegan. There's so much that I didn't know about what happens with MARC because it's such a quiet background organization. So thank you all for joining us and support the artist residency because it's not free to bring these artists to Monhegan, and of course support the Monhegan Museum. But thank you all for joining us.
Thank you, Jen.
Oh, Leith,
Thank
did you
you.
have one more thing you wanted to add?
No, I mean, I think you nailed it right there. It's just that, we are always looking for some financial help. We've had 70 artists since 1989. We've been helping to just advance these careers, support artists to be able to take risks and shift directions. And then also, the Monhegan Museum itself is just such an amazing organization, and caring for our cultural treasures. It's nice to work together. Thank you for that, and thanks to everyone who supports us. It's really impressed me joining the Monhegan Artists Residency, as it's become called. It's just always, I think it remains this scrappy organization. It's just kind of, held together by, a group of artists that are just kind of clinging to that rock one way or another. And, people who are just, even if they're not artists, they're just sort of enamored with it and want to participate in it. And, it's always a scramble, but we always get it done. And, it's really kind of an amazing thing. So it's a privilege to be a part of. And thank you so much for hosting us tonight.
Well, thank you all and good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you,
Good night.
everybody.
Thank you.